Today, I want to talk about the dark side of personal growth. I feel like personal growth is often over glamorized as if it's like a linear path. You change your habits, change your routines, you learn more about yourself, you become a better version, and it feels like this step by step linear process towards a better you. And when you're on that path, you're like, yes, I'm doing great. And when you fall off it, you're like, I just need to get back on that path and keep growing and moving forwards. Almost like going to the gym and putting in reps. Each rep you put in, you see yourself getting stronger in some small way, and you know you're stacking up that growth to become a stronger version of yourself in that context. However, what I've noticed on my own journey is personal growth often doesn't feel like that at all. And there's certain periods of personal growth which feel pretty horrible. So I want to talk about the dark side of personal growth today and the phases I've been through fairly recently. And hopefully that will relate to some of you guys who might be struggling, thinking you're doing things wrong, or just stuck on your own path. So often growth starts with a breakthrough. Maybe it's a new insight, a change of perspective. Recently I did a 10-day silent retreat, and that completely altered my way of looking at my life and looking at myself and what I was doing with my life. So that was kind of a breakthrough. And in this breakthrough, the first thing that really happens, especially for me, is it's almost like peeling back a scab. So the scab has formed this protective layer, and when you peel it back, there's a tender, raw skin underneath which it hasn't healed, and it feels pretty bad. So when you peel back the scab at first, you look underneath, you're a bit curious, and then your initial reaction is, put the scab back down. I don't want to touch that. And that's where a lot of people go. They kind of do a little bit of work and then kind of put the scab back and go back to their old patterns of routines. But when you make big breakthroughs, it's often when you pull the scab back and you just rip it off, or you peel it back a lot. Now, you're left with a lot to deal with. A lot of raw emotions, things you've pushed down in your subconscious, and now you've got to deal with them. The protective layer is gone, and it's just you having to process those things. And this feels horrible at times, and it can be overwhelming, especially if you take off a big amount and you feel like you've lost your kind of sense of self in some way, and there's a lot of unprocessed stuff that's coming to the surface. Now, in the kind of self-help world, at times, this will be sold as, yeah, you got to suck it up, experience those emotions, and then come out the other side. It's almost like that's going to happen in 24 hours or a long weekend. But sometimes you can be stuck with those feelings, those raw sensations for quite a long time. So for myself, when I did the recent silent retreats, I came out with a lot of unresolved stuff, and I got to my next phase, which was an identity void. I knew who I didn't want to be, but I didn't know who I wanted to be going forward. There's no longer like a set sense of self which I could rely on. And this is very destabilizing. When you make a big change, you rip up that scab, things come up, you end up not really knowing which way to go, because you know not to go back the old way, but you haven't really got a new direction. There's nothing calling you out. Again, this often gets sold as you'll find your new path, you will connect with yourself and see what's true for you. But often that doesn't happen, especially not in the short term. And by short term, I mean weeks to months. You can be almost like lost. For myself, I was very much questioning, what should I be doing with my life? What are the bigger questions? What's meaningful to me? And it was very destabilizing because I was moving away from what was familiar, which then leads to the next phase, which I call the messy middle. And the messy middle is the worst because you're disorientated, you're unclear, you don't know where you're going, and you don't want to turn back. So you're kind of in no man's land. It's almost like you're in the forest with no light. You know there's a way out, but you don't know if it's left, right, straight ahead, or behind you. So you end up just kind of not knowing which step to take, which step could be a bad step. You know what to avoid based on some things you've learned about yourself, but you're a bit disorientated, you're a bit unsure. The next phase of this, like in this kind of messy middle, which is where you feel a lot of emotions, uncertainty, is this kind of the myth of clarity. This is where I kind of push back based on my own experience and what I hear other people say at times, that you'll find clarity in this state. You'll become clear, and the direction, it's almost like you're in the woods and the lights will point you right or left, and you'll follow that light and you get out the forest and it's like, all is well because I found that direction. But I think the myth of clarity is feeling like you're going to fully understand where you're at. You feel like you're going to fully understand the direction you need to take, what the next step is, and all the answers are going to become apparent. So after my silent retreat, I thought I would spend a bit of time reflecting, which I did. I thought I'd spend a bit of time processing emotions, which I did. And then I thought I was going to arrive at some enlightened state where my life clarity had come into my vision. And now I know. Now I know exactly what I should be doing, what's true for me, what's not. And from there, I can live my life in a more coherent, aligned way. However, that clarity didn't come. Not in the kind of flash of a light bulb moment that I was expecting anyway. So then it leads to the kind of final phase, which I'm going into now and kind of stepping into. And that's returning to the old self, return to the old you, but now with a new sense of awareness, understanding your weaknesses, understanding your strengths, but reconnecting with who you are. Rather than trying to go, I'm going to become a new version of myself and the old me is gone, buried forever, you're adding layers to yourself. So you almost like lose yourself for a little bit, get lost in this uncertainty, this identity void, with this removed scab of all the pains coming up. You end up with this messy, middly period where you don't know what's left, what's right. And then at some point, you've got to go, right, I need to reestablish who I am, what I'm doing going forwards. And maybe some people can completely just step into a whole new version of themselves. But for me, I think I've got to reconnect with my old self, reconnect with all the things I've been doing, all the good stuff. And I think that's often the hard part for me, because when you're trying to change into something. And you sometimes want to throw out parts of yourself that you maybe didn't like, didn't want, think you've evolved past, think you've grown past. But for me, I've always had to return there, to reintegrate. And yeah, recently now, I'm starting to get to that phase of reintegrating my old self, whilst adding new layers of understanding, awareness to that. And that, when I do that, then I can start to take action. Because now I've got a kind of compass to orientate from. I can reroute myself, almost like I know who I am, and I can make steps from there. And this is always the challenge I have with this is I would have liked to have made a bigger change like from that. I'd like to become a better version of myself, a more enlightened, awakened, present version, when then I've got to go back to my older self and then reintegrate some habits and routines and patterns. So yeah, this is just something I wanted to talk about because I feel like people get stuck in these phases and they want to turn away from the personal growth journey because it feels disoriented and painful at times. And I think if I could relay my experience, it's when you try to take on too much too soon, you try to make too many changes, you can really lose your orientation of who you are and where you're going. And in that state, returning to your old self, stopping your personal growth path, at least that's what it feels, but you're still on the path, going back to what you know is familiar, and then taking steps from there. And then going back to the actions you can take and not trying to introspect or journal or plan or make too many changes along the way. So yeah, I put a little diagram together as well. I thought my brain was kind of trying to put this together. I've always liked the hero's journey diagram, which looks very similar to the one I was created. And as I was going through these phases, I was like, I can imagine the dark side of personal growth going through this kind of known familiar self to this unknown unfamiliar self, and then coming back out the other side. So I'll put the link, I might flash it on the screen, or I'll put the link in the bottom for you guys to look at. But yeah, that's just my thoughts today on the dark side of personal growth. It isn't always glamorous, but yeah, sometimes you've got to go through that messy middle, uncertain phase, and then reintegrate back out the other side.